Hi, I'm Allison Bukowski, and this is the CustomerX Files. I'm delighted to bring my years of experience supporting, building, and leading customer marketing and advocacy initiatives to the amazing community that supported me throughout my career. I've always been committed to moving CMA programs from transactional to engaging, multidimensional experiences, and this podcast is no different. Each episode, I'm joined by an incredible thought leader within the customer marketing and advocacy space, generous enough to share insights, knowledge, and experience with all of us, the CustomerX community. Brought to you by the PeerSpot Network, nothing is off limits. If it has to do with the customer experience, we want to talk about it. And just as our industry continues to evolve, so will this podcast. Several days after each session, we'll invite all of you to join in a live Q&A session with our guest. So let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the CustomerX Files. I'm, of course, Allison Bukowski, but more importantly, today on this episode, I am joined by Kyle Yantis, the Associate Director of Customer Success for SLAP 5. And I'm super excited actually today to have somebody on the show that has made the leap from sales to customer marketing and advocacy to customer success. We talk so much about how these areas are closely related. And if we have a little time, hopefully Kyle can maybe share a little bit about that with us. So as I mentioned, most of Kyle's career has been in sales roles, but a few years ago, about 2018, he made the leap over to customer marketing. And for the past 5 years has gone from being a reference manager to running advocacy programs. And now he joined me on, some people joke, the dark side, over on the vendor side, but as a trusted program advisor to the customers of SLAP 5. And Kyle he's always working on something related to technology. He's working towards his Salesforce admin certification right now, enjoying the transition into the CSM role. So it's not surprising he's here today, and he's interested in this topic of science and the intersection with storytelling. So I've known Kyle for, I don't know, Kyle, maybe 3 years or so now. And you are truly one of the calmest and kindest people I've ever met in our industry. And even though you're quiet, whenever you decide to open your mouth and speak, it is always thought-provoking, extremely intelligent, and you have this dry sense of humor that I love. So I'm excited to have you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time, so really delighted to join you here and appreciate the invite.
Oh, of course. Happy to have you. I know we have been talking about it for a while, but it's been a little, chaotic over the past several months, and it's also just been tough too. At the same time, the last couple of guests that have been on the show, we've talked a little bit about this in different ways, but budgets and resources have diminished. Our workloads are increasing. There's a lot of transformation even within the different roles, right? I would imagine customer success, marketing, we're asked to do more with less. And so we don't really have to debate, even though we're going to talk about metrics today. They're absolutely essential. Definitely for the world of customer marketing, they showcase ROI, and it really doesn't matter what area of marketing you're sitting in. This is what we're here to talk about today, this kind of intersection of science and storytelling. But in a second, because you're not off the hook, just like everybody else. Big believer of, we're people before we're professionals. So icebreaker question for you today. If we're going to talk about storytelling, I would really love to hear about what is your favorite book, both from childhood and then maybe also from adulthood, and why?
That's a good question. Funny enough, actually, I haven't been a big reader for most of my life. Probably wasn't until after college that I really started reading. So if it's childhood, the best book was not a book. Being outside doing something crazy was my happy place. But in adulthood, a book called Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari has been really impactful. It sort of feeds back into my formal education in sociology, but it's a book that touches on the fact that humans and our belief in stories makes us unique in the universe and certainly unique as a species on this planet. And it talks about how the various norms, folkways, mores, taboos, and laws have shaped our species throughout the millennia and really created the foundation for the societies that we operate in today. And that, of course, echoes into the business world as well. You can go back to the beginning of civilization and bartering and everything, right? It's all about, who do you trust? Do you trust the source of the thing that you're buying from, the person you're taking it from, and those who support that product as well? So I think it's you're a practitioner in customer marketing. Definitely recommend picking that book up. It's a good back to basics.
That I didn't know that. So is that what your secondary education was in sociology? That's where you focused?
Correct. Yeah.
That's so fascinating, and actually, quite frankly, it explains a lot about you. And I mean that in a good way. I'm I have a minor actually in sociology, and it's something that I'm also equally interested in. And I think that the art, right? And I think we can call it an art of storytelling, um, is a big part of how things came, to be today. And we could sit and have a philosophical discussion about it. But I love that you mentioned trust. And you talked about like societies and bartering. I still remember in fourth grade, we were learning about that, like different economic systems, and bartering was one of the first ones. And we got to do that. Like we had to bring in, like stickers, candy, or whatever. And everyone had their own little storefront, and you would barter. And I still remember to this day, there was something that this one, it was a kid named Scott, and he had something, and I wanted it, but I didn't trust Scott, not one bit. And that deal did not happen, which I think is kind of an interesting segue, right? I know we're going to talk about like, metrics and processes and stuff like that, but would you agree like trust is still really at kind of the heart of what we do as customer marketers?
Well, not only is it at the heart of what we do as customer marketers, that's actually the true value we bring to the organizations we work in today. Um, I think some of the largest trends, if you look at macro environment, we're seeing millennials and Gen Z come into decision maker roles within companies. And these are individuals that grew up in the age of computers, but more importantly, grew up in the age of social media. This sort of overly polished lens where not only people as individuals get to project their ideal image, but so do companies through statistics, through case studies, whatever it may be. They get to project what they want everybody else to see. And these generations are extremely adept at filtering out what is FUD, right? What is truth? And I think the storytelling, the amount of background and context that a true story provides beyond just numbers, that is what builds out a level of trust that these generations require now in their consumption model. And so customer marketing is sort of helping to redefine that storytelling and make sure that that trust is the cornerstone.
I love it. That was actually as a question on a recent Forrester survey, one question of many about trust. And would you be a repeat customer if you had trust, but maybe there were some missteps with the product, et cetera. So, but I'll veer us back to the topic at hand. I knew this would be a winding road episode, and I love that. So ever since I met you, I've I will admit, I have kind of branded you like the data wizard. And I mean that in a very complimentary way, because you're always looking at things in a very unique, and I don't think a lot of people can do it, right? Looking at it from the very human element, but then thinking about, yeah, but how am I going to measure that? And it's you that told me that, with that measurement comes discipline in things like operations and governance and organizational impact. So back to what we were talking about earlier, it's so important right now when a lot of us, people might be wondering, okay, great, we can talk about tools and technology, but how will I, afford those right now? That might not be happening, but it's still worth the effort of doing the work, right? And getting that buy-in internally so that when the purse strings loosen and you have an opportunity to ask for resources, you're positioned. And that was, you had shared that with me. I was like, yep, that's exactly it. So let's start out then with maybe the elephant in the room, marketing right now. Like, what's going on and what specifically in customer marketing? It's a really strange time, and then we can kind of dive into the specifics.
Yeah, so I think we're all seeing the tightening of belts and budget, and that has fallout in different areas of organizations. Are they divesting in their investment in people and teams? Are they divesting technology? Basically, all in the hopes of padding profits and going back to these dangerous trends from the '60s. I can unpack that for hours, but um, I think what we're seeing in marketing is an increased focus in trying to understand the ROI of every little spend. So, if you take the number of hours a staff member or number of teams put into putting together a case study or a video, you need to be able to capture the impact of that video in your sales cycle. Are you getting more people into your leads funnel because of that? Are you closing faster? Are you directly influencing opportunities? I think marketing over the years has gotten away with nebulous statistics like number of views or impact or push to the website, right? But I think this intersection of technology with data lakes, where we can take a source code or information snippet from anywhere and bring it into this data lake that allows us to sort of cross-pollinate systems in ways we couldn't before. The sort of excuse of not understanding your true dollar impact in marketing is eroding quickly. And so I think the trend is, what's the ROI? And if you can't come up with that ROI, then you're on the chopping block.
That's tell it like it is. That is pretty much exactly what is going on right now. And you had mentioned, earlier, I mean, I think we kind of have a sense for, what makes you so passionate about storytelling. What is it about this intersection of science and, I was an English major, so alliteration, hence science to storytelling is really why I picked it. But what I mean by that is the data from the science piece of it. What is it about that gets you so excited?
I think for me, there's beauty in numbers, right? We can all look at a number, understand it quickly, no matter what our background is. I think a lot of us work for global companies, so it crosses language boundaries. So data is really compelling in that way. But on its own, it can be quite empty. And so storytelling helps flesh out the how and the why and other things around it. Where I think there's a strong connection between science and storytelling and customer marketing and sort of processes is, again, harking back to sociology. Everything can be tied back to a decision or a lack of a decision. And I think even the lack of a decision, sort of the dark matter of our social webs, probably, like the rest of the universe, makes up the majority of it, lack of deciding to modernize or move away from current processes. Um, that's the bulk of these systems that we operate in. And I think it's interesting to unpack because once you recognize that indecision is actually the bulk of the matter, then you can begin to figure out and pull the common threads of why are we frozen in our current ways? How do we break down silos within our organizations? How do we honor centers of excellence and the various trust portions in a customer journey and advocate journey that those centers of excellence are responsible for? It's all tied, and that's all based on decisions, ones and zeros of social nets.
I I love that, also because it aligns, I've always tried to emphasize that, nothing is something, or actually there's a lot of substance in absence, which is what you're saying. You said it much more eloquently, that it's the what you don't have that actually is oftentimes a larger driving force. And I think that, to just sort of expand upon what you were saying, that's where I think this whole right now, the marketing, the landscape is, well, there is an absence of the the ROI, the metrics, the data, things like that. So how do there's a lot of questions that I want to ask around this, but what do you think are some of the common pitfalls, for marketers? And I think I can use that term, marketers. I mean, yes, we're talking a lot about customer marketing, but as I've stepped into my new role, and I'm looking at the larger marketing landscape, I think this is true of everyone, that we can step into some of these pitfalls. What are some that you've seen, especially recently, but even in the past? What do you see, and how might we be able to overcome or address some of these pitfalls?
Yeah, I think for me, it's all about your support network. In anything we do, the support network around you is critical. And for marketing, over the years, I think the average trend is a CMO tenure is like what, 3 years,
I think
five
so.
years within
Hmm.
companies. Huge numbers of turnaround, and they all have the same playbook, right? Come in, rebrand, refresh, launch a new website, change up social media, and maybe they get to see a little bit of that impact before there's churn at that level. And I think that historical context is very necessary because it erodes at the foundation of trust. Because if you don't have long-term leadership, there's a lack of accountability or seeming cultural lack of accountability. And so I think if you are a customer marketer or a marketer in general, you're trying to run a program that requires a lot of interoperability. I would say make sure you get executive alignment, and even better, a direct executive sponsor of your program outside of marketing. Um, I think chief product officers or chief customer officers are great allies. And it should be at the C level ideally, because um, if you're going to run a strategy and run a program at its highest level, you're also going to need sort of a governance committee, almost an internal client advisory board or SWAT team, insert label here, whatever you want to call it. But in order for that governance committee to exist in a way that requires accountability, you need sort of that executive level buy-in. So yeah, start with executive sponsorship.
I like that. And you said specifically outside of marketing, and you mentioned a couple of them. If you don't mind, maybe we can tag team on this. So I chief customer officer, had one of those in my corner before. It's huge, huge, because when you're looking at that role, that is over all things customer, and I love that, and I think we're seeing that model more and more, not just leading customers, but it's customer success, it's customer support, it's the tickets coming in, it's the operations that go behind it. Um, even I've talked about how as an advocacy professional, that was my favorite place to sit, was in that part of the organization. There's some reasons for that, why that one really matters and why that champion is important. You mentioned a chief product officer. Y- Just expand on that a little bit and why that one's such a winning partnership.
Sure. So for one, I mean, I want to make sure that I'm sort of eliminating a lot of bias in our field. Right now, customer marketing is largely in sort of SaaS and technology spaces, but I think the practice has capabilities and applications. If you're building welders and selling them on Amazon, I think you can still use customer marketing to capture video content or whatever of your end user's experience and use that to boost sales. So I think every company under the sun has a chief product officer or parallel level title position. So point one. Point two is no matter the support network around your customer, if your product is bad and you don't have good experiences, you don't have good stories to tell. I think the buck starts and stops with product. So making sure you align with the person who is in charge of that is critical. Um, Not only to get an understanding of the customer journey and aligning your advocate journey to the customer journey, but also looking at what's the product roadmap? How do we get our clients involved in guiding that roadmap in future product design and iteration, or maybe you're going to expand into a new territory, a new industry. Well, your chief product officer needs to understand that client journey in that new space. And so bringing in early adopters and clients to help build out the enablement and support around the product to ensure success of that initiative, it's all critical.
I like that. And if we have some time at the end, I would like to circle back to that topic of customer journey and go into that in a little more detail. So this is really good advice um, on avoiding some of those pitfalls. What about on the other side of things? It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. What about some positive trends that you've seen? And you're in a very unique position now, working like myself, getting to work with a lot of customers in this space, in the marketing space. So what do you see that we're getting right?
I think alignment with customer success is starting to become well fleshed out and built out. We're seeing uh, teams that are being asked to do more with less on both sides of the equation, customer success and marketing. And that sort of pressure cooker, as it were, gives people sort of an alignment where they can say, okay, we really could be in trouble here unless we figure out a way to do things more efficiently. And with that, I think there's a quick focus on governance, on operations, on breaking down silos, because each center of excellence within a company understands a portion of the customer journey and the advocate journey. And I think the more you can break down those silos and make things as transparent as possible, um, the ability of a marketer to uncover a piece of client evidence and to bring in customer-led growth throughout the company becomes much straightforward. It's more straightforward. It's much easier um, because you no longer have that veil to fight through. You don't have sort of that guarding of ownership of the client base. If you can sort of break things down and say, hey, we're all in this together, we're in the same boat. Um, we all have very similar metrics of profits to support or go gain. I think customer success is now getting tied into renewals. So renewals dollars equals um, a focus on the client journey to make sure they're enabled. And I think that focus also happens earlier in the client journey too, which creates a slingshot moment for your advocate journey maps. So yeah, like I said, all connected.
Yep. And that'll, when we come back to customer journey map versus buyer journey versus advocate journey, that's an area that I'm having some fun unpacking right now. But let's actually take this. Let's get into the weeds a little bit, which I know that I love that you're more than capable of doing. So let's do that, because I know listeners sometimes, you hear the high level stuff and you want to know, okay, but now what? So three, there's three specific areas that you've mentioned to me in the past, and let's take a deeper dive on some of those and talk specifically about how this concept of science and storytelling, crashing into one another so that we can apply some measurement as well as some strategy. And let's just start with ops. So from an operational perspective, and you've touched on some of this already, what how do we get started and how do we start making, progress in this particular area?
So I think it starts with understanding who owns what portion of which journey you're sort of unpacking. So for today, let's focus on the advocate journey. Um, I've spent years building out RACI models and PAXI models to understand what are the various teams and stakeholders that are involved with making a customer marketing program happen. What are the various projects that those teams create together? Um, what are the service level agreements required? And I think, honestly, is we're sort of back to basics where there's a lot of companies that are just in the water treading. They're trying to keep afloat. They're trying to churn out customer evidence, at least within customer marketing, right? It's very tactical. Quick, I need a reference for a contract that's closing in a week. Quick, there's an event coming up in 3 weeks and I need a customer speaker. Well, unless you sit down and you map out, okay, an event speaker takes 9 weeks to happen. So field marketing, I actually need your event calendar like a quarter ago if you're trying to ask me for stuff this quarter. And creating that level of accountability where the customer marketer isn't being squeezed by the company and being asked to sort of wave a magic wand and make something impossible happen. Because at the end of the day, what are you doing? You're asking a customer to do something on your behalf. And there are some crazy, amazing companies out there, but at the end of the day, somebody's giving away their time and effort and energy for free. And at what point do you introduce burnout? So to flip the script from reactive to proactive, you need that basic level operations exercise of mapping out who does what are your service level agreements, and then that'll also give you the capability to start to say no. And I think when we talk about the macro environment of trying to do more with less, no should be your favorite word.
I just said the other day that we all need to get a little bit more in touch with our inner toddler. And in fact, I think it might have been on the Slap 5 webinar that you had with Nick Maida, which was wonderful. But we need to get in touch with that ability to say no. That's what I meant by it. Um, it's not. It's okay to say no. I spend a lot of time talking to marketers that are new in their career, or they've transitioned into another area of marketing, and there is a fear of saying no, especially right now in an environment like this. But I always encourage, to your point, flip the script a little bit on that and saying no, but saying no for the right reasons, right? Or creating those SLAs so that it's understood, hey, I'm doing more with less. So my answer is no, unless we're going to reprioritize, something else. And those sometimes people will look at me like I have three heads when I say you should have an SLA for everything. Speaker requests, to the example you just used, reference requests. And if nothing else, if it's not a matter of, even though your colleagues should be respecting your time, respect the customer's time. If you have to put it back on the right party, it would be the customer. And I think people are sometimes, I don't know if you agree, Kyle, but it's an opportunity for internal education as well about what we're doing in our role and why that much time is needed. You brought up a great example of a speaker for an event. It is not as simple as flipping an email off to a customer and just saying like, hey, in 3 days, there's this. Could you hop on at, 1 Eastern and do a talk? And, by the way, could you speak to these new product features and enhancements? There's a timeline and prep work that go into that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree? Is it a good opportunity as well for internal education of stakeholders?
Certainly, yeah. I think when you can help refocus back on the customer and start to have your company actually build the muscle of being customer first, I think it's the easiest thing to say, but actually one of the hardest things to do in business, because oftentimes when you do put the customer first at the heart of everything you're doing, it flies against what the majority of Western capitalist companies are aiming for, which is top profit margins, making sure that you're running as lean as possible, maximum efficiency, whatever it might be. But if you then put the lens into a customer first basis, you might actually be limiting your profits because you're going to invest more heavily in engagement, activation, customer communities, whatever it may be. You're going to start to bloat that operations budget a little bit in the hopes that in the long term, you're going to see a strong return on that investment. And I think the long-term picture, that's that change in focus that I think customer marketing as a macro scale is making happen. That change of, let's not think about a quarter out, a year out. Let's think 5 years out, 3 years out. And for operations and client marketing, that's an important distinction and a big piece of the internal education cycle that they should be doing.
Yep, agree wholeheartedly. It's the long play, and I would argue that's the more strategic play. And that's usually it takes time to implement something like that. So what about from a governance perspective? We talked about internal champions and building out. You mentioned it, but we didn't dig into it. I'm a big fan of an internal cab, I think is what you called it, but having your governance committee, let's talk about that. How does that specifically, help, and how can you, apply some measurement and metrics to that?
Yeah, so I think it starts with understanding what is everybody being held against? What's got their feet to the fire? What are their big rocks? And honestly, how do they get paid? There are companies pay out bonuses for certain levels of achievement. In CS, are you getting paid on maybe a new feature adoption? Are you just getting paid on renewals for sales? Not only are they going to be commission based, but also there's going to be different initiatives thrown their way, maybe to increase product adoption on something else. So there's an additional bonus on top of that. Starting with, I think, where people get paid is kind of an easy win, quick win for customer marketers, because when you talk about that base level of incentive, you then are able to create a flywheel motion. Let's talk specifically about sales. Let's give an example of you're launching into a new territory with a new product. So this product has a 3x board value. So then a sales rep is able to hit their annual number just that much faster by closing a product. Well, as a customer marketer, what do you want? You just want sales to be engaged with your program and operating through the technologies and workflows that you've built, so that way you can track the impact of your program on their opportunities. You can do that easily and quickly by going to a sales rep who recently closed that deal, got 3x board credit, and maybe, spent that money on buying their kid a used car and they're learning to drive. Connect back to storytelling, even internally, get meta with it, and reinforce your governance with these wins to say, hey, if you follow the playbooks, we're going to help you get your number in sales, which then, if sales is doing their job right and they're selling to individuals and companies within your ideal customer profile, that's going to make customer success's job that much easier. And when it gets to renewal timeframe, customer success during a renewals timeframe also might be asking you for references. So then you need to keep that internal meta flywheel of, hey, Mr. CSM, Mrs. CSM, you used me for a reference on this renewal. How'd that go? What best practice did we reinforce? Just connecting it back to your own internal people and internal storytelling is a good foundation for governance.
I like that. I like to tie back to storytelling, and I actually jotted down on my notebook, get meta with it, which I think should be on a t-shirt. I'm pretty sure that I'll have to reach out, tell Captivate that they need to create a new t-shirt. And everything you're saying, but you, like you always do, we talk a lot about, goals and finding out what are the goals of your internal stakeholders, and that's what you're saying. But how do you get paid? Like, let's just cut to the chase. That's going to resonate, and figure that out. And I think that one thing that I'll add, which is like a bonus for those of us that are, trying to execute on a program and trying to prioritize how to support our stakeholders, by going through this exercise, everything, Kyle, that you just described, helps focus your program. It helps you make decisions on where should your energy be spent. And if you're being asked to do something that doesn't seem to align with those goals of your internal stakeholders, you can go back and lean on it. I do that all the time, to be able to say, there's only one of me, there's only one of my team. So this is how we're going to support you, CS, because this is most important. This is how we're going to support you, sales, etc. So it can also help us, I think, preserve sanity by leveraging that same approach. What about this is everyone's favorite topic, the silos, the barriers, the organizational roadblocks, pick whichever term you want to use, but it's those relationships that, we pride ourselves as marketers on, building strong relationships. What happens when they're not strong, or how can we kind of apply these tactics we've been discussing to that particular challenge?
Sure. So to help this, I've actually taken a lot of my charts and RACI documents, and I've, at least for the advocate journey, mapped out what are the centers of excellence that need to be involved in a customer marketing program, what is their role, and what are the various projects and sort of pieces of execution that a customer marketing program does to achieve customer-led growth. It's probably taken about 3 years worth of work and experience to map out. But the roadmap that I'll launch on LinkedIn and various community channels, it's intended to be a starting block. And the reason why I keep going back to mapping exercises is I think too many companies don't understand who owns the relationship with a customer at any point in time. Doesn't matter what you're selling. I think if you're in Salesforce, HubSpot, insert CRM here, there are very few companies who can look at an account and answer the question, who is on first base with this person? And by making it an organizational problem, an operations problem, you can then sort of eliminate some of those cultural barriers, those natural protective instincts that different centers of excellence have built out over the years, to say, hey, this is in our best interest for everybody to participate in this program, to voice what they're learning from their clients, voice their challenges. And by sort of being a little cold about it, I think that's sort of kind of the science of it, the data, right? Be a little cold about it and say, this is for everybody's good to map out who is on first base, not necessarily from an accountability standpoint or, pointing fingers. I think that's what everybody goes to, is pointing fingers. Oh, something's wrong with the customer. Who do we go and get? No, it's about who do we go and support? And customer marketers can help make that change. I think that's a very powerful way to be tactical in a way that supports the overall strategy and the larger evolution of a company.
I'm chuckling. One, because I don't have any more space in the notebook for what I'm just going to call Kyleisms that should go on t-shirts. And I always say that they're at PeerSpot, Yehuda, and if he listens to this, he knows I call him the Yoda of sales. I'm going to have to call you the Yoda of, although now you're in CS, but maybe I can just, of all things, like, can I still call you the Yoda of customer marketing? Is that okay?
That
Yeah.
works. I'll have to work on his grammar structure, but yeah, I'll get
Yeah,
there.
we'll do that on the next episode. We'll put you to the test. But I was also sitting here chuckling when you're talking about, be cold. And I think two things. One, that you said it is not, this is not how we look at pointing fingers and placing blame. And I think back to where we started talking about right now, the landscape of marketing. This is not a marketing problem, although it becomes a marketing problem more often than not. This is an organizational problem. If renewals are down, if sales are not up, it is not the typical marketing didn't bring enough leads, marketing didn't deliver enough stories. That's what happens every time. And I can get a little fired up about this because I've seen it time and time again in my career. And unfortunately, these things, everything you're talking about, this stuff's not in place. So it's difficult to be able to stand up. And when you said be cold, that's the science. Definitely made me smile because I like the analogy. But I think and I'll use a personal example of this. In one of my first roles within customer advocacy, I took so much flack about, well, you just have the fun job. Wouldn't it be nice to get paid to take customers to dinner all the time? That's what you do. It's the warm and the fuzzy and the relationships. And don't get me wrong, that's my favorite part. And it's never going to stop being my favorite part until we were in a meeting and I hauled out some metrics and I brought out some examples of sales not following the process and the SLAs that we had in place, which is why they didn't get references for an RFP. And in one case, someone went around it and ended up calling a reference from the little black book, and the person didn't work at the company anymore, and it ended up blowing up the deal. And there was shock, the faces in that meeting, that here I was, the warm and fuzzy relationship person, delivering some actual numbers and being a bit cold is one way, I guess, to describe it, so that they could understand that there is an impact. So I use that story just to say, be cold. It's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not a relationships first person. It's just sometimes where you have to go. And I think that that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what you're also saying, Kyle, that you have to do both.
100%. I think any customer marketer who has been in practice for 6 months, even we all have war stories of somebody doing exactly what you mentioned. They go around your process, they ask the wrong person at the wrong time, it blows up in their face. I think, we've all seen mega deals where the CEO is on the email feed and things go wrong at the last minute because for some reason sales has it in their head that reference is going to save everything. We all have those war stories, and coming back to it and keeping people honest and accountable and being able to protect yourself and your program and say, nope, this is not the procedures that we have in place. This is not the operations or governance. They went around me. Having that level of accountability is very important. And I think the more you keep people or even entire sections of your companies in check with that level of honesty, the more respect and solidity you get around your program.
That took the word right out of my mouth. That's how you build respect. It's not building an adversarial relationship. It's building a respectful relationship. And I'm super excited. I know you told me about the roadmap tool to be able to see that and help you promote that amazing work. Just so everybody knows it's coming, and I've had a sneak peek, and it's amazing. So it's going to be hugely helpful to those of us out there that are trying to tackle a number of these things that we were talking about today. One question, last question, Kyle, and I ask a flavor of this question to everyone on the show, but I'm hoping that you can put a specific spin on it for me. So you've been in sales, you've been in customer marketing and advocacy. Now you're sitting in customer success. Um, what advice, the best piece of advice you would give to this community, but maybe you can kind of put a spin on it as far as that interconnected connectedness, is that a word, with these roles and working together with the different partners. What advice would you give?
Get good at wearing other people's shoes. And so by that, I mean, people wear different types of shoes. So you have to understand how to lace them up, how are they built, how do they feel, and what terrain are they built to tackle. So if you're going to be a really good customer marketer, read all you can read, check out blogs, check out podcasts, and make sure you subscribe to various influencers in the centers of excellence that you operate with: sales, customer success, marketing in general, field marketing, especially sort of your squeaky wheels, those who are coming to you with the most need. Start with that. But yeah, just trying to learn where people are coming from, because customer marketing sits at an interesting intersection in the companies we operate in, and it's fairly high stakes. People get pretty passionate. And so being able to take things with a grain of salt and having that extra level of understanding and patience is just critical. So that way you can empathize, you can step back, take a breath, and come back to the table with the right suggestion on how to move forward.
Perfect perfect advice. And if you don't mind, I love mixing metaphors and analogies and keeping with a theme here, but can I take that and bring it back to our story theme, if you don't mind? I'm going to take a crack at it. So this whole concept of walking in another person's shoes and compassion, I worked at a company that was their definition of compassion. But we're talking about stories and that intersection. My daughter just this week had to write a paper based on To Kill a Mockingbird, which happens to be one of my favorite novels of all time. I have a daughter named Harper, and there's a reason for that. But Atticus Finch in that book says, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside his skin and walk around in it. So that's my literary connection for you, Kyle, on everything that you just said and we've been talking about today. Get to know your partners, be compassionate, walk in their shoes, slip inside their skin, whatever you want to use, and then measure it. Better be damn sure that you can measure it and put some discipline around it. This has been such a good conversation. Any final parting words of wisdom from you, Kyle? There were so many today. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, just keep your eye on the long game. I think a lot of the metrics that we're being held accountable to are very short game focused. So do your best to sort of push against that. Use your executive sponsors to get alignment and sort of business reasons behind extending your program's runway to profitability. But I think, yeah, focus on the long game is where we all need to be right now in the overall picture of customer marketing.
Great. Thank you again so much. And for those of you who have been listeners and you're familiar with Peer Perspectives, where we do our live Q&A, I've decided to kick that up a notch. So if you have questions for Kyle, or, Anna was on a couple episodes ago talking about tools and technology. Valeria was here talking about grassroots advocacy, and they all, I decided, played off of each other. So we're gonna move into the new frontier of peer panels and have 3 amazing professionals on to field questions, etc. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for the next episode. Find me, of course, on LinkedIn. I'm sure Kyle would offer the same to everyone if you'd like to connect. But until the next time, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the CustomerX Files. Don't forget to follow me, Allison Bukowski, on LinkedIn, where you'll find information about our Peer Perspectives session, your chance to join the conversation live on each episode's topic, ask questions, and network with your peers. CustomerX Files is brought to you by PeerSpot. In a market full of hype, PeerSpot's buying intelligence platform is where tech pros go to get practical, reliable information on enterprise technology. You work too hard to build strong customer relationships. It's time to leverage those relationships in a way that maximizes value for your organization and minimizes customer effort. PeerSpot's approach to customer-driven content empowers customer marketers and advocacy professionals that strive to achieve the gold standard within their industry. For more information, check out marketing.peerspot.com. And to keep getting this show in your podcast feed every time a new episode drops, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.